Emergency podcast time. We talked about this topic a lot yesterday with Derek Piper on the podcast, but the news becomes official today that Kofi Cockburn is coming back to college. But where is he going back to college is the big question now. But Kofi Cockburn has withdrawn his name from the NBA draft before the NCAA deadline on Wednesday. And so he maintains his college eligibility, but he is in the transfer portal and he will remain in the transfer portal. And Illinois will remain an option, but they will have competition. We'll dive into all of those details. And we welcome back Joey Wagner to the Illini Inquirer podcast after a nice weekend away, a wedding with a friend. Joey, welcome back to the Illini Beat with some of the biggest news in college basketball this offseason. And of course, it surrounds Illinois.
Did I miss anything while I was gone? All I missed was a basketball commit, a couple football commits, and he come back right in time for the Kofi news. And I'll tell you, Jeremy, I was thinking about this right after the news broke that Kofi was withdrawing. And outside of name, image, likeness, right, which is the biggest news in college sports, and it's going to be as we all continue to kind of see how this plays out. I don't know that there's a bigger college basketball story right now because a lot of the other questions you had about who will stay, who will go, have really solidified themselves. And for the most part, most of who decided to come back to college came back to the team that they left to begin with. So now you have this 7-foot, 300-pound monster of a human trying to find out where he's playing his next season. And by the way, he's going to elevate you 3 or 4 rungs up the ladder wherever he ends up. So it's really a kind of a crazy time. It's emblematic of everything we've seen in the changes of college athletics. And it just so happens to be Illinois is kind of right at the heart of this thing, watching this play out in real time and actively being a part of it playing out.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the news that has come out today. Andrew Slater, who's been all over Kofi Cockburn news, was the first to report it. Tipton Edits then followed it up. But I think the most significant information we found is from Jonathan Givony, who's a great NBA draft writer, now at ESPN, founded Draft Express. Kofi gave him some really intriguing quotes. He said, "I'm pretty much open. There's a possibility I return to Illinois and a possibility I don't. I want to make a quick decision as soon as possible. I don't want to go back and forth. I'm going to take some visits, but I'm not sure where." And then he said that Kentucky is among his options with Orlando Antigua, now gone from Illinois, where he recruited Cockburn to, and now back at Kentucky with John Calipari. Cockburn said of Antigua, "He's the reason I went to Illinois. When he left, along with Chin Coleman, I decided to go in the portal to leave my options open. Kentucky, it's a serious option. Antigua is my guy. I'm going to consider them, but there are a lot of schools. I wasn't really focused on that while I was in the NBA draft. Now I can take my time and evaluate it better." So in one breath, or maybe he just is a message, but in one message he says, I want to do this as quickly as possible. The other one he says, take my time and evaluate my options. It is clear he is evaluating his options. And this is what college basketball players now can do, right? And one of his options now is to make money playing college basketball. If this is a year ago, I don't think Kofi Cockburn's coming back to college. I think he's going to go make money playing basketball somewhere. Well, somewhere is now in college, and he can make a lot of money as one of the faces of college basketball. And now he can get into the transfer portal and see what his best opportunity to succeed, whether that's financially or on the court. I think he'll succeed anywhere on the court, Joey. He is one of the most significant college basketball transfers of all time. I really mean that. Like, I haven't found yet in my research another guy who earned All-American status, consensus All-American status, and then transferred from that school the next year. I haven't found that yet. This is one of the most significant transfers in college basketball history. And yes, it is an Illinois player potentially here going somewhere else. So what's your biggest takeaway from Kofi's statements to Jonathan Givony of ESPN?
I think it was that Kentucky's a serious option, which may sound silly because I think all of us, since he announced he was in the portal last week, thought, okay, that could be an option. And we connected the very dots that he laid out for us today, but he said it, right? It was all, well, this makes sense. And maybe some rumblings from this pocket of the country or this pocket of the country. And now the rumblings are from Kofi. And he puts that out there and says, that's on the table. On the surface, it's really not that surprising. It's not. I mean, it's all why we thought this was happening or why we thought that could happen. But to hear him say it, it's like, okay, this is this is really something. I really didn't think his other statements were that profound, because what else is he supposed to say? I mean, I'm in the portal, but I'm leaning towards X, Y, or Z. That doesn't help you for teams that aren't X, Y, or Z. So that was like, okay, I get it. The visits are going to be interesting because, kind of as you mentioned, you don't. This doesn't really happen quickly, and you take visits. Or I guess maybe have a different understanding of what quickly means, because it seems like to do that in a way that you would hope it would take a little more time. So frankly, I kind of got hung up on the Kentucky thing, and maybe, we don't have the context of the interview, but maybe he was specific. I mean, it sounded like when it was Kentucky question mark, if I'm remembering the transcription right. So he was specifically asked about it, obviously for good reason. But we don't know who else is going to get involved here, and if
a lot of people would love to, right?
if you're thinking
Like
about
how much will, he be interested in other options when Illinois is a strong option, right?
Right.
Kentucky is a strong option. Like if that's your 1-2 list, I don't know how much further you need to go if you're Kofi Cockburn than potentially two of the best teams in the country if he's on those teams. One he's very familiar with, the other one he's very familiar with an assistant, and obviously it's a blue blood.
That's what I was going to say, is you're not really starting over in any of those two instances. Obviously more so at Kentucky than you are at Illinois, because you've been there for 2 years. But we'll see. I mean, I'm sure, Jeremy, over the course of the next 36, 48 hours, there are going to be rumblings of so-and-so's in play. So-and-so's trying to get in play. And like you said, everybody should try to do this because it's Kofi Cockburn. And if there were anybody, if it goes elsewhere, if there's anybody who could have their jersey up in 2 places in college, like, he's got the physical and basketball potential to do that. It's really, man, the more you think, it's just a very wild ride here. And I honestly don't even feel like we've hit the peak yet.
What's amazing for Kentucky is he might be number 2 of 2 options at the center position, with Duran, the top 22 prospect, who's probably going to reclassify to 21, possibly as their number 1. So that is what it is like to be a blue blood right now. But yes, I mean, Kofi Cockburn
in the mix. I mean, just another body up there.
Oscar Sheboy. Yeah, I was talking over you, but Oscar Sheboy. Yeah, I mean, he just transferred there from West Virginia, and I'm sure he's like, wait, what? What's going on here? But I mean, Kofi Cockburn changes any team in the country. Like Illinois, if Cockburn comes back, you might go from preseason number 35, 40, right, in the rankings. I don't know if that's where they are, but somewhere around there, to potentially a top 10 team, right? Kentucky, you had, Kofi Cockburn to that, you're a top 5 team probably coming into the preseason. He was number 3 among Power 5 players in player efficiency rating last year, behind Luka Garza and Drew Timme. So we know how good he is. He's a legend here at Illinois. What is going to be really interesting, Joey, is what is he looking for? Like, obviously he wants more options. So he feels like maybe Illinois isn't my best option right now. Is it money? And I can't blame him if that's what it is. But I still feel, and I have no market research behind this, I still feel like if we're talking NIL money, I feel like Illinois is still the most marketable place for him because he's already a legend here. Illinois fans will buy whatever he is selling. I think this market, even though it's smaller than Lexington, will be all in on him. While Kentucky, you got to spread the wealth with how much talent is there, right? Like here, it's Tim and Andre Curbelo are the main ones. And yeah, Trent Frazier will get a little here. Maybe DeMonte Williams gets a little here. But like it's those 2 guys, if he wants to come back, and those 2 can really work well off each other, as I was talking about yesterday. We also got the Chicago market right there. And I also think long-term, I mean, you're talking about jersey hanging in 2 places. I don't know if he'd have a jersey at Kentucky, even if he's an All-American, right? Like it's just, that place is different. I mean, the guys who have come through there, Kofi's one of the best of all time at Illinois. And if he does it for another year, I think long-term, you just talk about opportunities and, connections you make. Some of those would be severed if he left here. I mean, let's be honest with you. I mean, you'd still appreciate what he did here, but it just wouldn't be the same. So I still feel like that. But I mean, obviously you are very marketable at Kentucky. He'd be a great player there. He'd be playing for one of the biggest brands in college basketball and, college sports in general. But I just think if it's money, I feel like Illinois is a great thing here. But if it's something more personal, right, along with money, if it's just like, hey, my guy left, Orlando Antigua left, Chin Coleman, I loved playing with him, Io left, like there's just uncertainty there now. And maybe I just want to try something different. Maybe I want to see if John Calipari, who's created so many NBA players, maybe he's got the key to making me an NBA player. I don't know. Like, but the rational side of me, Joey, says like, man, it makes a lot of sense to stay here, but not all these things are just that, on paper cut and dry.
Right. And I also think with Kofi and NIL, wherever he goes is going to be a team that is going to have a lot of eyes on it. Whether that's Illinois, whether that's Kentucky, that's going to help, right? I mean, if you're on national TV so many times, in the season, people are going to know who you are. And his play, obviously, is going to get him off. So I think that market factors in. There was something at the end of the ESPN report today where he had talked about showcasing a mid-range jump shot, which was interesting to me. Not because I don't think he has it. I think we've obviously seen some of his better moments at the free throw line indicated like you don't expect to see it. But it's like, okay, I could see how he would have one. But if you're a coach, you have to pitch that, hey, I understand the NBA is interested in perhaps seeing more of this from you, even though realistically, if you're any coach, your best option is to put him back to the basket, get your automatic two and go down the other way, right? But I'm curious how much that plays into it. NIL, I mean, Jeremy, you nailed it. Last year, maybe this situation isn't the same. Maybe Kofi's playing wherever, getting a paycheck, but it is hard to imagine that there would be a bigger – well, let's be fair. Kofi's going to have a market for NIL literally any place he steps, be it Kentucky, be it Illinois, or anywhere else in the country. But you're right. I mean, people would be so jazzed up to have him back. They would buy every shirt or whatever the case may be that they could get their hands on. They would support every cameo or whatever the app may be to get him to say, hey, how you doing to you? So I think to that point, that's a really, if you're Illinois, you'd think that's a good sell, right? I mean, your market is already, the floor here is so much higher than it is for anywhere else. And the ceiling, we'll see where that could go. We just don't know. I mean, that was, frankly, today was the first time we had seen quotes from Kofi about anything. So we don't know exactly what is the hierarchy of what he's interested in as he makes this decision and how long it's going to take to check off the boxes. So a lot of it's speculation. It's been like that for longer than a week, but there are some tea leaves. I think NIL is a huge deal. And look, that's not exclusive to Kofi Cockburn, by the way. Everybody wants a piece of this NIL operation, and Kofi just happens to be somebody who would be one of the two most marketable guys on his team, along with Curbelo. So we'll see. Jamaica, we talked about this with Andre Curbelo in Puerto Rico and New York, and Kofi would have a very similar opportunity there. But again, that happens anywhere.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Kentucky's going to be very talented, right? Like Ty Washington's going to be a point guard there. They've gotten some transfers. CJ Frederick is now there. So Kentucky's trying to raid everybody, and boy, they really seem focused on raiding Illinois this offseason. A lot of, valuable pieces of turning this program around. So, hey, Kentucky, I get why that would have a lot of appeal, or if there's another program there. But even basketball wise, like, I don't know why Illinois wouldn't be open to some of those things. And maybe that's why Kofi's in the portal. Maybe if you're optimistic, Kofi is in the portal because he wants to hear from Illinois. Okay, how do we make this work? Like financially, how are you going to make this better than, say, a Blue Blood? Like, give me your pitch, or give me what your readers, or what we're going to do for the next year to where I can make $500,000, because I think that is within the realm of possibilities. And I think Brad Underwood obviously has embraced that. You've chatted with him about it, Joey. They think Io DeSumo would have made hundreds of thousands of dollars last year. And then you add, their NIL team has been all over this, right? Like, they have a really good team that seems to know what they got to do to help these kids market themselves. Illinois can't do it themselves, but I think you also have a fan base and a, support system, booster system here at Illinois that would support that. Now that's kind of all above board, right? And what skirts the rules, I don't know anymore. That's going to be very interesting to watch. but Kentucky's a powerful force too. They're a very, very powerful force. So maybe Kofi's just trying to get that from Illinois, maybe the basketball part of it. Listen, I think Andre Curbelo playing with him last year should pitch itself to Kofi. Playing with Ty Washington and some of those guards at Kentucky, 5-star guards, like, yeah, they're going to be playing in the NBA, but Curbelo might too. And Curbelo might help you if you want to do more pick and pop, right? Get you more opportunities. But you also got to make your free throws yourself, right? to be able to do that. But then there's the other part of me, Joey, that I've said this many times. Like, when a guy enters the transfer portal, I'm never that optimistic that they come back. So I know Illinois is working this, and that there's been positive conversations the last couple of days, according to Derek. But like, when a guy enters the portal, man, all bets are off. Like, I think you're facing a big battle here. So maybe I'm not as optimistic as some other people, because entering the portal suggests, man, this guy's really open to leaving, which is crazy to think that Kofi Cockburn might play college basketball next year, not in an Illinois uniform.
It's both saying they're open to leaving, and it's also opening the door for other coaches to come in and say, this is why you should leave. And there's going to be a lot of voices who are on the phone trying to get a hold of this guy to try to get him there. And every pitch is just one more than they would have had they not been in the portal, right? I mean, every coach who talks to you, if you're not in the portal, you more or less are able to shut it down here. So I do lean a little bit with you, where it's like, how many, I mean, there's obviously players who go in the portal, return to the same school. It does happen. But how many? I mean, the odds point in the other direction, more or less. And that's not great if you're in the hope that Kofi returns.
Maybe the situation is different. Maybe it is. I mean, this isn't all Americans don't transfer. Like, they don't. But here, one guy has entered the transfer portal, and usually when guys enter, they just don't stay. So, like, I'm trying to put the pros and cons of everything going in here. And I think there's a lot of pros on Illinois' side here, but that doesn't always, like, somebody else might feel something differently. Kofi or people around him might feel something differently.
If you're Illinois, as we talk about NIL, I am pitching. Yes, you can't pitch, right? But if you're Kofi, you're looking at Chicago. Northwestern is not what it was a few years ago, and we've seen pretty quickly Iota Sumu left his billboards everywhere with the Illinois lottery. So I think for us, what we have to do is kind of zoom out a little bit. Like, a lot of people hear NIL and they think, what is around Champaign-Urbana or around Lexington, Kentucky? But zoom out a little bit. What are the possibilities elsewhere? And if that's, maybe that's something that could entice them. I don't know. You would think comfort would be important, but again, there could be comfort with Orlando Antigua and Chin Coleman. So for every pro, Jeremy, or every con, I come up with an otherwise. So I don't know, man. I just don't. I don't think we expected to be sitting here discussing this literally like 6 days ago.
What do you think if he leaves? Like, what'll be your thoughts if he leaves?
Where does he go? Right. I mean, if he goes to Kentucky, I would say I can see that. Right. I get it. I still think there's a very reasonable argument for Illinois, and one that, like, I would still be shocked because he's a second-team All-American who left the place he's a second-team All-American at. But that would tell us how strong the connection with Orlando and then Chin is. If he goes elsewhere, I've got so many questions. Yeah, just a ton. So
that would suggest something
more
very personal, right? It would have to be something very personal.
Right. So to me, as I think of this, and maybe someone's going to try to get involved, but it's like, okay, how do you beat the relationship you built and the status you built for yourself at Illinois and with Brad? Like, let's be honest, as we've talked to Kofi the last few years, it's not like he doesn't know Brad Underwood, right? Like he seemingly, and what he's told us,
they seem to work well with each other. Right. Kofi, like, so many big men, and this is a generalization, it's not fair at all. There's so many guys who are 7 foot or 6'9" to 6'11" that play basketball because they're told to play basketball, and they're good at it because they're very tall and athletic, right? And then that's kind of hard to push them sometimes. Like, you can tell that maybe some of the 6 foot guard is a little bit more in love with the game and pushes himself a little bit more. That's not true of Kofi, and Kofi seems to react well to Brad's hard coaching, and Brad loves that Kofi wants to be great, wants to be better. So it seems like it's worked out well for them, but it's clear like Orlando and, even, I've mentioned him before, Adam Fletcher and Kofi seem very, very tight as well.
I was going to mention Adam Fletcher and Kofi. I mean, he has been very vocal about how much Adam Fletcher helped him with his game. So that's what I'm saying. To me, it's like, okay, the relationship with Brad, the status you've built, Fletch, you've got Curbelo, Trent, DeMonte, these guys who I mean, objectively, more people on the Illinois basketball team and around the program than you probably do at Kentucky. I know recruiting is a pretty well-connected world, and a lot of people you've come up with in roughly the same age, but it's like established everything at Illinois and some very powerful, if it goes that way at Kentucky, established relationships.
Okay. So now I'm going to look at this I think we covered like the really skeptical version of this. I think the optimistic version of this would be Kofi is really playing this well, and that like he is building up like, hey, put together a good package for me here, leveraging this well. And then all of a sudden he decides to come back to Illinois as this conquering hero again. Like, oh, he almost left us and now he's here. We appreciate him even more. Right. And boy, the NLI opportunities come flowing in for him. That would be, I mean, I never thought they'd get 3 years of Kofi Cockburn. Maybe I did at some points. I didn't know if he'd be an NBA player, but I just thought, hey, he's going to be 22 years old in September and he's just going to want to move on and play college ball. But now it's a different world in college basketball. And you had Kofi Cockburn with Andre Curbelo, and we'll talk about another potential transfer you can add here as well. But even if you don't get Dawson Garcia, but you just bring Kofi Cockburn to the current roster, that's a Big Ten contender. I don't know if they're as good as Michigan with Hunter Dickinson back. I don't know if they're as good as Purdue with Trevion Williams and Jaden Ivey and all those guys coming back. But that team is in that realm. Like they would be in the top tier of the Big Ten, potentially with 2 all Big Ten candidates and potentially the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year.
And Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams and Jacob Grandison and the list, Coleman Hawkins, the list kind of goes on. I mean,
Austin Hutcherson,
glass half full. Illinois could be like 3 weeks away from like skyrocketing up everything or whatever the timeline is. We really don't know. And that is a way different outlook. And by the way, they would have this NCAA tournament experience in their pocket, which I don't think really held me back in thinking how good last year's team was, but maybe some people thought like that 1920 team really, had there been a tournament, could have helped, lead the way there a little bit. So glass half full, probably like glass full, right? I mean, like that would be if that came down to it, right? You look at this offseason and the coaching changes, the transfer portal, all of this, and you still come out in a pretty good spot. I mean, if you're Brad, he's a big walker, I guess. You're strutting through the streets of Champaign because somehow you've pieced all of this together in a way that really, if you would have told me, Jeremy, when they left Indianapolis in March that this was going to be coming down the pike, I'd been, oh my gosh, this is, that's tough. And if it does go that way, that's a huge win for Brad, for Chester, for Jeff Alexander, the coach to be named at some point in the world. I mean, that's a huge win.
All right, when we come back, I mean, Kofi's not the only big transfer decision coming up, and the other one might come sooner. So let's talk about that next on the Illini Inquirer podcast. Yeah, Kofi has taken all of the kind of focus away from Illinois potentially adding an all Big Ten caliber player here, Joey. Dawson Garcia, the Marquette transfer, everything Illinois has wanted in a 4 and needed in a 4 is coming down to decision time, and it could come at any moment in the next couple of days here. But averaged 13.6 rebounds, shot well from 3, can really take it off the bounce. Maybe not an elite rebounder, but a good rebounder, and can block some shots as well. Just really versatile player that showed really well at the NBA G League camp, better than Kofi, and he decided to come back to school. But he is considering four schools right now. Illinois is one of them. He took an official visit last week. He took a visit to North Carolina. He took a visit to Arizona, and he's also considering coming back to Marquette, though for a different coaching staff. Steve Wojciechowski fired. Shaka Smart is in there. This one, like, get one of these. I've said this before, get one of these two guys, and Illinois all of a sudden is potentially battling in the top 5 of the Big Ten, towards the top of the Big Ten. Get 2 of them, you might be the favorite. But no matter what happens with Kofi, like Dawson Garcia is a season changer for Illinois.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the potential of him picking Illinois has been kind of overshadowed a little bit by Kofi, right? But don't overshadow it, because that is the piece. I mean, you can go down every year on the roster and say Brad has been missing this exact piece as a stretch for a guy who's just a nightmare to deal with if you're a defense, and suddenly that is it's you or 3 other options here. That's pretty close. I mean, how close was the last time Brad was this close to that? I mean, you probably go back to EJ, right? I mean, and how close was that? We don't know, but
TJ Holyfield was one. They were in. Texas Tech won that one.
Forgot about that one, but it's a big deal, man. And even that can change how this season is viewed, at least right now. And obviously, there's still a lot of things they all have to play together, right, and get used to each other, however that works out. But that would be sizable. That would be a huge late addition too, right? I mean, we're into July here.
And it's an interesting place to be with him making a decision before Kofi. When Illinois started this, they probably didn't think Kofi coming back, like they started their pursuit of Garcia, probably didn't think Kofi was going to come back to college. Or maybe I don't have that wrong, but it just was less hanging over. And I talked about this with Derek yesterday. I mean, maybe it's a better pitch with Kofi there, where it's like, hey, you can get so many more opportunities in this offense. You got Curbelo feeding you the ball. You got Kofi drawing double teams. Man, you're going to have so much space to operate with. But there's also, you're competing for touches, right? If Kofi decided to come back. But my whole deal is, like, Kofi's going to take time, and you go as hard as possible for Kofi Cockburn, because he is one of the best players in college basketball. He's one of the legends of your program. But if Illinois lands Dawson Garcia, that is monstrous, absolutely monstrous for what Illinois' program trajectory is, and really for what the season is. But I mean, we're talking about, if they don't get either of these guys, Joey, there's going to be a drop off, obviously, from a 1 seed to the most wins in the Big Ten regular season to all of a sudden middle of the Big Ten, right? Most likely. If you get Dawson, I think you can compete towards the top of the Big Ten. If you get both of them, obviously you're probably the favorite here in the Big Ten. But if you just get Kofi, you're one of the top players in the Big Ten as well. So I think it'd be great if you can get Dawson Garcia on board first, because at least, like, you're going to take a step forward, even if you do lose, or at least from where you are right now, even if you do lose Kofi Cockburn to another school.
Yeah, there's still a lot of ball game left for what this front court looks like. And here's the thing with both Kofi and Dawson Garcia. Anywhere, as we start to evaluate what are the likeliest, or what we think, obviously we know the 4 likeliest destinations for Dawson Garcia, and what we suspect could be for Kofi, you're going to be, I mean, the touches pitch really kind of is null and void, because everywhere those guys are looking, there's going to be a lot of players who are trying to score and to get the ball and to make plays. So maybe some places will have a stronger pitch than others, but
it's all about touches. You just go back to Marquette, right?
Right.
That's what I would do.
So that's interesting. But if you're trying to pitch Dawson Garcia, you say, hey, you're exactly right. Hey, there's a 7-footer we hope is going to be down there taking some pressure off of you. And by the way, it's our intent. And I think as you look at this on paper, we're going to have some pretty good shooters around you also. And arguably somebody who could end up by, maybe he'll start this way, I don't know, but by January being one of the best point guards in college basketball, or somewhere within that conversation. So the pitch is strong. There's a lot of dominoes that if they fall a certain way, it's very weird to think about that where we are in the calendar right now. But if some of these dominoes fall a certain way, holy smokes. And if they don't, maybe kind of holy smokes a little bit the other way.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, what would you rank the most likeliest? I mean, this is just us speculating. Like, we're not as plugged in as Derek on some of this stuff. But like, if you told me today, I can either get one of these two, or roll the dice, potentially get 2 or potentially get 0. Just give me one. Like that's how I would play that game. I would play the game that way. Like, just give me one of them, and I will be very happy with where we are moving forward. Maybe some people are more open to risk than I would be. This is why I don't invest very much in the stock market or things like that. So I don't gamble on sports. Just give me what I know. But yeah, you can't play that game in recruiting. That's what makes this whole recruiting thing so interesting is, you can't just say, yep, I'm just going to take one of those and you get it. You have to close on the deal and have all these kind of juggling in the air at once.
As I speculate, though, I'm not sure. I don't know that one will have an impact on the other. I mean, if two different, but yeah, I mean, if you're part of the program, you go to bed at night, just fingers crossed, like, okay, just get me one. We're still going to fight like crazy to get two if that's on the table. And let's also be clear. I know some people are maybe a little frustrated with the process that Kofi has taken in deciding what he's going to do next. And I understand a lot of that is rooted in just trying to come to terms with what college basketball and college athletics is kind of
better get used to it.
Yeah, kind of evolving to here. But there is no scenario in the world where you should ever, at any point, ever say, just pass on Kofi and let's move on. Just none. That doesn't exist. It's not something that should happen. You fight for that recruitment.
Can you imagine if Brad Underwood came out tomorrow and said, Kofi left us. We're you don't do that. Like,
he would be run out of town. He would be run out of town. You literally
rightfully so.
That's what I mean. You fight until the very bitter end and you hope you win it, but you never stop fighting for someone like Kofi Cockburn. He was an All-American. His jersey is in the shame.
Yeah, you could say that for number 8 or 9 on the roster, or maybe even 4 or 5, right? Not for an All-American. Like it's a different way. It's a meritocracy, right? Like let's be honest with each other. We can all talk about team and this player is equal to that player. Like Tom Brady is just as important. The long snapper. No, that's not the case.
And name, image, likeness. I think. Well, I mean, obviously, right? But so you fight until you have to stop fighting, or until you're told you've lost the fight, or until you close it. But I don't think you get Dawson Garcia if that were to be the case and say, whew, let's put our feet up and relax. You say, whew, look what's in front of us here. And oh my gosh. So
yeah, if you land Dawson Garcia, you at least know you have hedged a little bit, right? Like you've elevated the floor to where I think you can be a top 5 team. And I would project them to be a top 5 team in the Big Ten with all those things we're talking about. I mean, Omar Payne was a nice ad. Alfonso Plummer is a nice ad. Like those freshmen, I don't think you're going to have to count on very much because you got DeMonte Williams and Trent Frazier back. And I think DeMonte gets overlooked a little bit with him coming back. Grandison, Hutcherson, hopefully Hutcherson's healthy. Like you haven't yet a nice team with Dawson Garcia, like an NCAA tournament team, and one that I think could be a lot of fun next year. If you don't land him, it's all in on Kofi. And if you don't land Kofi, we're looking at a team that middle of the Big Ten and probably fighting for an NCAA tournament berth, I would think at some point.
Yeah, and you've really got to maximize who you have on your team. There's less room for, if you don't get either, then you've really got to hope you can get Omar Payne to where you believe he can be and do it pretty quickly, right? But I was thinking about this earlier, Jeremy. This is the first time, I believe, in Brad's tenure that we're not going into a season like, okay, they need one or more freshmen to really, really step. Now, I think you'll probably see some freshmen who do step into some sort of role. But in the past, it had been like, okay, they need Adam Miller, they need Andre Curbelo to really, really go. They need Kofi Cockburn to really, really go. They need Ayo Dosunmu to really, really go. And now as you look at this, it's like, if they can get a Luke Goody or an RJ Melendez or a Brandon Podziemski to really, really go, then that, again, changes a little bit of the calculus and expected maybe some progress for Coleman Hawkins here, see where he goes. But
because if you don't get Garcia or Cockburn back, Coleman Hawkins has to be good or has to be at least impactful. Like Austin Hutcherson, we can sit here and talk about him as an X factor if Garcia or Cockburn comes or both of them come, right? It's like, oh my God, what a bonus he could be at 23. He's 23, I think, years old. Like what he could be as this athlete who's long and can shoot the cover off the ball in these videos online, right? But like if those guys aren't here, those guys are really important pieces to your team. And maybe they're good, but they're complete unknowns. That's why you can go from like, if neither Kofi or Dawson Garcia comes to Illinois, could you make a case that team could be a 6 seed or 7 seed in the NCAA tournament? If everything goes right, yeah. But if not everything goes right, if somebody gets hurt, you're looking at a team that might be on the wrong side of the bubble if things don't go that well. While Garcia, if he comes or Kofi comes, like you're going to make an NCAA tournament. There's no question about that. It's just how high can you be in the seeding? How high can you finish in the Big Ten?
You know, it's crazy, Jeremy. Last year with COVID, as the schedule like really changed. It was like, okay, it's whatever month it is, and we still don't know what IO. I think IO announced in the early part of July, if I'm not mistaken.
Late July, early August, back to back for those two. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and now it's not going to be that late, but it is still July, and there is still a lot of like impactful decisions looking down. And Brad has kind of talked about this before. It used to not be, it used to be you go into July, you pretty much know what you've got going, and onward you go. And there's just not a lot of rest right now. Eventually, maybe the schedule will change, but I'm with all the transfer rules and the leave the draft. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy to me where we are, that there's still so much out there that could change quite literally everything.
I need to commission Derek Piper a book on the 2021 Illinois basketball offseason. Like, this has been nuts. Absolutely nuts. And like, I know Illinois fans, like it's woes. I get it, man. Like right now, I totally get why all of you are just like, why this is entertaining, but like, I don't like this kind of entertainment. It's almost like this thriller, and you're not sure if it's going to be a happy ending or really, really depressing ending at the end of it. Now, I think Illinois basketball, I've said this, they'll be fine, but they could really be fine if they get one of these two players or both of these players and not have to sweat out an NCAA tournament selection next year.
Look, Jeremy, you and I interact with or see a lot of Illinois fans, and we know that they are just kind of perpetually waiting for the next stomach punch a little bit, right? And I think what
stomach or another area, yeah,
sure. So I think what happened was last year that it was like, okay, before COVID, Illinois was hitting their stretch on the basketball floor, and you started to kind of feel quote unquote back. And then last year, I think they put their guard down, like the guard that they have up for their own personal reasons, and like back. And then all of a sudden, it's a little bit of a rocky road. And I'm with you. I still think Illinois basketball is back. You can debate what back is, but I think they're in a good spot, and they will be long term. But I think it's just they finally had gotten excited, and then it's like, oh my gosh, this is not the same nucleus of everything as it was when I really, really bought in.
What I give to have like a beer with Brad Underwood right now, because everything Illinois fans are going through. What do you think that guy is going through?
I would want like 4 beers so I could really, really know what Brad Underwood is. I do wonder that, and I hope one day, whether it be to us or someone else, he kind of, I think there's a way you can share what this was like without dunking on anyone or without, slant. I just think that this had to have been tough, right? I mean, we're speculating here. We don't know. Brad hasn't shared that with us. And look, he probably never will. But this has been an off season of a lot of change. I mean, I remember, Jeremy, we did a podcast, months or whatever, April, May, and I think we called like the winds of change, and they're still howling.
That's right. That's right. That's a good way of putting it. That might be the title of this thing. So I'm sitting here thinking, Joey, like he mentioned when he talked about Chester or Jeff Alexander, he's used the word loyalty a lot, right? So as I think of myself, like putting myself in his shoes, Orlando put in so much work and Chin put in so much work. And I've said this over and over again, I cannot blame those guys for going to Kentucky. I think that is good for their careers, no matter if Illinois fans want to hear that or not. It's Kentucky. It's John Calipari. It's a blue blood that helps their careers. And what Chin has done in 10 years, going from AAU coach to that, unbelievable rise. Orlando, he and John Calipari have a history and a great history together. Stephen Gentry, can't blame him for going to his alma mater after a couple great years at Illinois. But Brad's got to be sitting there going like, look what we did together. And now, even if I understand all of this, it still stinks that all those guys left. So what you do? He goes and gets an alum, right? And Chester Frazier bleeds this place. Then he goes and gets Jeff Alexander, promotes him, and says, man, you want to be here. You want this job really, really bad. And I think you're really good, more so than a lot of people think. So I think he's shown that a little bit of like how he feels about, what he wants in this program. through his actions. I think he's shown that, like, loyalty still matters to him. It's just this is more of a business. This isn't, hey, we all play as a team. Like, these players are individual brands, and somehow you got to make it all work together. These coaches are individual brands, and you got to probably reset it almost every year now. And that's got to be frustrating for an old school guy like Brad. But he's got to adapt to it. I think he knows, like, hey, if I want to be a college basketball coach, this is what I have to do. This is how we have to go about it. And I got to find a way to be successful doing it.
And I think he's done a pretty good job, at least from what we've seen from afar, in adapting to it, right? Because if it was just, it's all loyalty, it's all this, then he does what some fans maybe would say and say, okay, we're out of this Kofi sweepstakes, even as foolish as that would be. But I think he understands there's a merging of loyalty and his culture that he's gone in on building and explaining to us, and also recognizing that you've got to meet brands halfway in the middle, and you've got to meet players and coaches in the middle. And kudos to him, because he is a kind of an old school coach. Almost feels like a knock, and I don't mean it to be, but I think coaches, I mean, there are a lot of coaches we've seen who are like, this is just not what I signed up for back when I signed up to do this. So he's, we're seeing him find his way through riding this wave and adapting to what this is going to be. And you've got to, right? I mean, you don't really have a choice if you're a college coach. If you're not trying to adapt, you're not trying to win. And that's,
I'm thinking of who's really succeeding in the Big Ten right now. Juwan Howard, right? Like, Juwan is crushing it because he can understand these kids, because he's been a superstar college athlete. He's been in the NBA. He understands all of that melding and how that all works together. And maybe being outside the college game is giving him an advantage, that some haven't. Now, Matt Painter's kind of found this old school kind of thing. Now, he dealt with a little bit of turnover last year from a couple guys. Matt Harm's leaving that program, a couple other transfers. So he's dealt with that, but he's found kind of how he wants to build the program. And it's worked for him. So I'm interested to see how Brad goes about this, moving forward. Is it more the Juwan Howard way or Matt Painter way? I imagine it's more kind of Painter, but Painter still gets really, really good talent because he wins basketball games, and Brad continues to get really good talent because he's winning basketball games. So it's just interesting how it's all happening while Tom Izzo seems to be struggling just a little bit, right? Kind of like Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski adapting to this. It obviously was pretty difficult for them. I mean, they're recruiting well, but maybe not dominating as much as as they had in the past.
I'll also say I read an article, I think it was more football related, but you could expand it to basketball. Could NIL create more parity, right? I mean, are there more chances to be a star here versus a star, but not maybe not as big of a star elsewhere? And could that kind of shift how many of these super teams, more or less, that you see? And that'll be an interesting thing. We're not going to know the answer in its entirety now. We're not going to know it all next year. But I think over the course of the next few years, as NIL really starts to get sorted out and understood in the way that it's going to exist for long term, we'll start seeing some of this. And I'm curious which way Brad goes. I mean, I think we've seen him in the middle, to be honest. He has gotten into the transfer portal early on. When you look at someone like Adonis De La Rosa, or even, I think, was he the only or Hutcherson or Grandison? It was, okay, positions of need, right?
He loved the sit out year. He loved them sitting out to potentially replace Io. That was the idea, was that he could replace Io and they could stay old. Like, that was get old, stay old. He thought those two could be a big part of it.
Yeah, so I'll be curious what this all looks like down the road. But I will say, and maybe it won't always be like this, or maybe it will always be like this, but Brad has done a good job of just being present in the middle. I think the middle is really a pretty good place to be. I mean, it's hedging quite a lot, but it's hard to go all in on one thing because you're always going to compromise elsewhere if you do that in some capacity. Maybe
I don't think you can go all in on high school kids, right? I think you got to go both. You got to go both ways because you never know when somebody could transfer. Like, I never thought Adam Miller would transfer after the year he had, which I thought was pretty good, but it didn't fit
in the portal.
And yeah, I was about to go there. Like, and I never thought Kofi would transfer to another school, but that is a possibility today. So you have to continually kind of find this mix. And I think every offseason is going to be really interesting. It's just going to be really interesting. And the coaches who can handle that and kind of roll with the punches are going to be the ones that can be successful. And to be honest with you, I think Brad has rolled with the punches extremely well. I think this offseason, whether they land Garcia or Cockburn remains to be seen, but I think he's rolled with the punches. I think he's gotten a couple staffers that make sense. He's gotten some recruits. He's gotten some transfers I really like. But boy, he's got two more that can definitely change his tenure in the next season ahead. All right, Joey Reiner, I think we covered every angle of that, and I'm sure we'll have more news to react to very shortly. Thank you as always, man.
Okay.